The King's Avatar, Chapter 1593. A Senior's Fearsomeness. Audio source, WurshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1593. A Senior's Fearsomeness. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Electric wave formation, waltzing wave slash. The weakest summon, the goblin, couldn't resist these two powerful attacks, but so what? The viewers could clearly see that Lord Grim wasn't inside the electric wave formation's range. By the time the lightning struck the goblin, Lord Grim had finished forming the hand seals for Shadow Clone technique, launching a sneak attack from Empty Wave's side. But after drawing out a waltzing wave slash, Empty Wave's silver weapon, Divine Chain, didn't stop and headed directly towards his side. Killing intent emanated from the edge of its blades as it tore through the air. A wave wheel slasher flew directly towards Lord Grim. Yishu was caught off guard. His Lord Grim had only just landed when the wave wheel slasher arrived. There was no time for him to dodge, guard, parry. It would be useless. Wave wheel slasher was a skill with grab priority. Even if he tried using his shield to block it, the wave wheel slasher would still tear apart its defenses, locking him in place and dealing damage. A dismantle skill could work, but dismantle skills required the proper timing. Using it now would be too late. There was unexpectedly nothing he could do. All of the viewers, including the pro players, thought that the wave wheel slasher was inescapable. Suddenly, Lord Grim swung his arm, sending out a flash of sword light. Magic waves specific to Spellblade swirled around the light. It looked exactly the same as Empty Wave Slash. It was also a Wave Wheel Slasher. Wave Wheel Slasher against Wave Wheel Slasher. The two streaks of sword light intertwined. In a collision between two of the same skills, the outcome would be decided based on attack power as well as factors such as timing. Lord Grim's attack had been hasty, and the magic emanating from his sword couldn't compare to a true Spellblade's. The level 20 Spellblade class advancement skill. Killing Intent Wave specifically buffed wave skills. Unspecialized could not learn class advancement skills, so his wave skills would naturally lose to a Spellblade's. Lord Grim lost the priority battle. The undulating magic swallowed him, forcing Lord Grim to stagger back. However, the imprisonment from the wave wheel slasher was shattered by the collision. Lord Grim's wave wheel slasher fell short compared to Empty Waves, but it couldn't be considered useless. It had nulled Wave Wheel Slasher's grab effect, achieving Yishu's goal. After staggering back 2 steps, he immediately steadied himself and rushed forward again. Although Spellblades were part of the Swordsman superclass, their strengths lay in mid-ranged combat. Close combat wasn't their class's expertise. The moment Empty Waves swung out a Wave Wheel Slasher, Jiang Botao had Empty Waves step to the side to pull away. Lord Grim was able to negate his Wave Wheel Slasher's grab effect, but the shockwave still pushed him back 2 steps. Even though he was able to immediately steady himself and rush back, Empty Waves had already followed with his next attack. A streak of scarlet fire roared towards him, a flame wave slash. Fire wave slash was the strongest of the wave slashes and had the strongest knockback. Forcing your way through it wasn't possible. It wasn't just flames. It also contained powerful undulating magic. Unable to get past it, he could only dodge. However, Yishu knew that this attack was just the beginning. Fire wave slash, ice wave slash, and light wave slash. These 3 wave slashes contain fire, ice, and light were often used together. This combo was nicknamed Threefold Wave. The fire wave slash had already put Yishu in a fluster. How could ice and light not follow? And the ice and light quickly followed. Lord Grim turned and used the assassin skill, Shin Cut. Cold light flashed as the fire wave brushed past him. When he looked towards empty waves again, as expected, it was the threefold wave. The second light wave had arrived next. As the name implied, light wave was extremely fast, but Jiang Botao had underestimated the speed of Lord Grimm's movement skill. The light wave flashed past him, missing Lord Grimm. Thunderous applause. Yi Zhu didn't know, but the viewers watching did. The waltzing wave from before hadn't hit the goblin behind the stalactite, instead circling around it before returning like a boomerang. To dodge the light wave Lord Grimm had used Xing Cut. However, although he was able to dodge the light wave the waltzing wave had looped around, striking him in the back. Lord Grimm lost his balance and stumbled forward. Naive. Pure. Sure enough, none of those traits had any relation to Jiang Botao. How could a naive and pure person set up such a tricky and crafty trap? Ice wave The third wave of the threefold wave swept towards the stumbling Lord Grimm. Jiang Botao had calculated how he would follow up and was about to go through with it, when he saw Lord Grimm suddenly raise his umbrella. With a whoosh, the umbrella opened. Lord Grimm used his shield to block the ice wave Jiang Botao felt a tremble in his heart. He had calculated the distance and timing of these consecutive wave Even a machine wouldn't have been able to react in time. For Yi Zhu to do so, he must have been prepared AEAD of time. The thought flashed through his mind. The ice wave hit the canvas of the myriad manifestations umbrella. The shards of ice seemed to come alive, shooting back towards empty waves. He really was ready for it. This wasn't just a block, but a skill, shield counter. Shield counter absorbed and reflected damage depending on the level of the skill. Lord Grimm's shield counter could only be level 1, so the reflected ice shards was very sparse. However, the speed of the ice shards was no less than before. Jiang Botao had wanted to chain together his attacks, so he positioned empty waves as close as possible to Lord Grimm. But that only made it more difficult for him to dodge the reflected ice wave now. The reflected damage from a level 1 shield counter was insignificant, but the threat from ice wave wasn't the damage but rather its freeze effect. The freeze effect would be drastically reduced from the shield counter, but it still couldn't be ignored and had to be dodged. Spellblades wore plate armor, so their movements were slow. Dragged down by the heavy weight of his armor, Empty Waves was just barely able to dodge the ice shards, but by this time, Lord Grimm had closed in. With a bang, Lord Grimm's myriad manifestations umbrella struck Empty Waves' armor. Knights also wore plate armor. With their heavy weight, the knockback from a charge could send a spellblade flying. But Lord Grimm's charge was much weaker. WooshOurWorldAudio.com. Against a plate-armored spellblade, all it could do was send the opponent stumbling back a few steps. But this was what Yi Zhu wanted. He wanted to take the initiative, not send empty waves flying away. What do you think? Have you gotten a taste of this senior's fearsomeness? As he typed, Lord Grimm rushed forward. His myriad manifestations umbrella transformed into a spear, stabbing towards Empty Waves' head. Jiang Botao didn't have time to reply back to Yi Zhu's message. Empty Waves held up his weapon, Divine Chains, in an attempt to parry the Dragon Tooth. Suddenly, the myriad manifestations umbrella transformed. The canvas retracted, and the parry missed. All that remained in Jiang Botao's sai was the muzzle of a gun. Boom boom boom. 3 anti-tank missiles fired. How could Empty Waves dodge something at point-blank distance? Blast after blast, Empty Waves was swallowed by smoke and light. Flash. A sword was unsheathed. 2 streaks of light followed, creating a cross in the air. Empty Waves was still inside the smoke and light from the explosions. However, he was able to swing his short sword, Divine Chains, downwards from the previous parry position. Ghost Slash. Ghost Blades and Spell Blades primarily dealt magic damage. As a result, when one class used the other class's skills, the skills were quite powerful. This Ghost Slash collided with Lord Grimm's Gore Cross. Ghost Slash had a blow-away effect and impressive attack priority. The slash shattered the sword light from Gore Cross, and Lord Grimm was forced to jump back to avoid the blow. The Divine Chain swung back up, using a Spellblade skill, Earth Wave Slash. The earth was swept up as it headed towards Lord Grimm. By this time, the flames from the explosion had yet to completely disperse. From Jiang Botao's screen, only a fuzzy haze could be seen, but even so, he was able to push out 2 attacks. With a turn, Lord Grimm dodged the Earth Wave Slash. The Myriad Manifestations umbrella swung horizontally, while changing forms into a scythe, a priest weapon. Using an Exorcist's skill, Hook, it went straight for Empty Wave's throat. Jiang Botao's vision had returned to normal. He rolled on the ground, dodging the attack. He slashed upwards with his sword, counter-attacking with a Storm Wave Slash. The two began fighting back and forth. Lord Grimm had too little health. Even though he had been furiously healing himself at the start of the match, he wasn't able to heal too much. No one had expected him to win this fight. It was just a question of how much damage he was able to deal to Jiang Botao. In the end, he was able to take down 24% of Empty Wave's health before falling. Using 4% health in exchange for 24% was a very good result. Happy was happy. They got up and welcomed Yi Shu down from the stage. Of course, in reality, their applause was mainly for Yi Shu's win in the first round against Josekai. That had been a huge boost to their morale. Yi Shu had been in the player booth the entire time, so he didn't know. However, the others remembered how quiet the stadium had been when Josekai lost. Mo Fan was Happy's second player for the group arena. He clapped very mechanically alongside everyone else, waiting for Yi Shu to come back before heading onto the stage. "Be careful, that guy's got a very black heart," Yi Shu reminded. No one knew if Mo Fan heard him or not, but he was on his way towards the stage now. On the side, Fang Rui booed at Yi Shu. "Is there anyone with a blacker heart than yours?" "Of course not. Boss is the best at everything." Steamed Bun replied back for Yi Shu. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1594. Young Growth. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1594. Young Growth. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Both sides had sent out their second player in the group arena, but the atmosphere in the stadium seemed to have paused at the first matchup. When Mo Fan walked towards the stage, the crowd members in the away team seats clapped wildly, but because the Samsara fans were still downcast, the overall atmosphere felt rather oppressive. No boos or taunts were thrown towards the opposing side. The atmosphere in the stadium could affect how a player performed, especially more emotional players. For them, the more intense the crowd, the more exhilarating it was. It didn't matter if the cheers were aimed towards them or the other side, the cheers could help ignite their fighting spirit all the same. The atmosphere in Samsara Stadium was abnormal. It was only the second player in the group arena, but because of Josekai's defeat, the crowd seemed to be dispirited and cold. However, this ice-cold atmosphere seemed to be far more comfortable for Mo Fan compared to the past. His footsteps were light and quick as he walked towards the stage. The match soon began, and the two characters loaded in. The map wasn't a random map, so the group arena lineups were predetermined. Jiang Botao knew who his next opponent would be. But while Mo Fan's deception loaded into the map, Jiang Botao was in a similar mood as the crowd. He was still thinking about the previous match and was having trouble readjusting his mindset. Eox Novel. Siom. Yishu's Lord Grim only had 4% of his health remaining from his battle with Josekai. However, with that 4%, he was able to take out 24% of Jiang Botao's empty waves. This was not a good outcome. But if you considered that Yishu had healed at the start and his true health wasn't really 4%, it wasn't too bad. But he couldn't seem to forget how he had believed that he had seen through Yishu, but in reality, he hadn't, and Yishu was still able to get off a combo on him. Even though he was able to quickly stabilize his footing again, he had indeed experienced Yishu's fearsomeness. He hadn't looked down on Yishu. At the start of the fight, there had been a psychological battle. Jiang Botao's words hadn't been fierce. There was no unadorned ridicule. He had used a rather passive-aggressive method to get at his opponent. This was because he knew that to these experienced old players, that sort of unadorned trash talk wouldn't faze them. On the contrary, the seemingly more careless but sincere remarks were more likely to tilt them. Jiang Botao wasn't the first on Samsara to go up, but before the match had started, he had talked with Yishu quite a bit. It didn't seem like he was trying to provoke Yishu. He just seemed to be calmly stating a fact. However, Yishu exposed his intentions to teach him a lesson. Jiang Botao's calm and collected provocation had clearly succeeded. He had wanted to trigger this sort of mentality from Yishu. That way, when he faced Josekai, he might play more rashly and become distracted by Jiang Botao's words. Even if he won against Josekai with this mentality, when he faced Jiang Botao, he might play poorly from being too excited. In short, Jiang Botao's goal was to break his concentration. However, it ignited Yishu's fighting spirit instead. Then, he beat Josekai and fought against Jiang Botao well enough to display his fearsomeness. Jiang Botao was at a loss. He wasn't sure if his mental attack had worked or not. If the skill gap had been wide, then this sort of mental attack was useless. But Yishu was facing Josekai. There wasn't a wide skill gap. That was why Jiang Botao was rather inclined to believe that Yishu hadn't been provoked by him in the end. Was the attitude that Yishu displayed just in order to make me overly optimistic? This was the fearsomeness that Jiang Botao experienced. The subtleties in this psychological battle couldn't be completely uncovered in just a few minutes. The psychological battle was no less fierce than the battle on stage. Loading complete. When these words popped up, the scene instantly shifted to his character's view. The countdown finished, and Jiang Botao immediately refocused. Yishu? Who? What did he do? No idea. His opponent was Mo Fan. What he needed to do was beat him, that was all. Jiang Botao's attention quickly returned to the match, to the opponent he would be facing next, to Happy's Mo Fan. A quiet, persistent, patient, and explosive player. He played rather unorthodoxly, but what was more astonishing was that after an entire season, these unorthodox traits still remained. Jiang Botao was very curious to how Happy practiced. Had there been any guidance for this rookie? Could they all be self-made geniuses? But Happy didn't only have one rookie though. The others weren't as unorthodox as him. Unless Happy told him the answer, thinking about it was pointless. Knowing the reason wasn't important anyways. As long as he could see what condition his opponent was in, that was all that was needed. Empty waves began to move, going straight towards the center. At the same time, Jiang Botao typed out in the chat. Straight to the center. Going around. Thanks. No response. Jiang Botao wasn't surprised. Up until now, no one had seen Mo Fan say anything during a match, let alone respond to trash talk. Jiang Botao hadn't expected any response from Mo Fan, and reality proved that he was right. Empty waves quickly reached the center of the map. The center of the map had a huge stalactite that connected the ground and ceiling. Before Jiang Botao got close to it, he looked around, and sure enough, Mo Fan's deception had taken a roundabout path. Beox Novel. Siom. Mo Fan would circle around 9 times out of 10 to set up an ambush, and it looked like this time was no exception. But this was Samsara's map. When choosing a map, the map should be advantageous to your side but disadvantageous to the other side. The map should help the players on your side perform, while restricting the players on the other side. That was how a map should be picked. Mo Fan's playstyle was restricted by this map. Seeing that the other side hadn't gone straight towards the center, Jiang Botao had Empty Waves find a spot and wait there quietly. There were 3 stalactites in his immediate surroundings. The closest one was still a distance away. If Mo Fan wanted to ambush him from there, he would still be able to react in time. By positioning himself here, he seemed to have shut down Mo Fan's preferred methods. Would you like my coordinates? Jiang Botao had finished finding a spot. He continued to check his surroundings and tried to communicate with Mo Fan. Mo Fan spoke more in the game than in real life, but when playing in a match, he didn't like to talk with his opponent, especially if it was to respond to this sort of useless chatter. I don't need your coordinates because I already see you. Deception was hidden behind one of the 3 stalactites close to Empty Waves. It wasn't easy to ambush him at this distance, so Mo Fan patiently waited. WuxaWorldAudio.com. But Jiang Botao didn't move. In these circumstances, if Jiang Botao didn't move and he didn't move, he would be the one penalized. Mo Fan had made this mistake before, and he still remembered it clearly. He checked the time and made sure that the other side wasn't going to move. Mo Fan was helpless. He could only act. Deception peeked out his head from behind the stalactite. Jiang Botao had been checking his surroundings the entire time. Suddenly, he noticed a flash of cold light from one of the stalactites. Deception had thrown a shuriken towards him. Empty Waves dodged it and then quickly moved forward, swinging his divine chains. Jiang Botao didn't think a simple swing of his weapon would hit Deception, who only had a small part of his body exposed. As a result, when he swung his divine chains, he used Waltzing Wave Slash to curve his attack. Deception pulled back and then took out his ninjutsu. He stabbed it into the stalactite and then leapt onto it. Jiang Botao couldn't see what Deception was doing, but he also wasn't charging in. After all, Spellblades were a mid-range class. Empty Waves moved laterally to expand his vision. At this distance, Empty Waves could see Deception above. Mo Fan's attempt at a sneak attack was like child's play. Mo Fan had completely overlooked the characteristics of his opponent's class. But no one had expected Deceptions to move along with Empty Waves. Empty Waves moved to the side to widen his vision, while Deception also circled around to keep himself hidden. He had predicted what Jiang Botao would do. At Happy's player bench, Yishu, Sumucheng, and the others gave off smiles of gratitude. Mo Fan was becoming more and more like a pro player. For example, predicting what the opponent would do based off of the opponent's strengths. He had been trained in an unorthodox way. His playstyle was unique to him, but his thoughts, his intuition, and his approach towards the game was becoming more and more like a pro player's. He was playing the game like it was a competitive match rather than like his former scrap-picking days. With this change in perspective, he was gradually forming his own way to better utilize his strengths to win. The more time went on, the less Yizhu worried about Mo Fan's future. Mo Fan might not like talking to others, but that didn't mean he refused to change. He had his own way of doing things. It might be slower than if he listened directly to his advice, but what he found in the end would definitely be the most suitable and the best for him. It's good to be young. Wei Chen suddenly sighed. He had also seen Mo Fan's quiet growth and hated how he wouldn't have the same opportunity as him ever again. If not, no matter how difficult it was, he would certainly try his hardest to break through and improve. Growth was the domain of the young. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1595. Com Terror. Audio source, wushouworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1595. Com Terror. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. Waltzing wave/mist. There was not a soul in sight. The others unhappy were gratified seeing Mo Fan's read on Zhang Boteo, but this alone wouldn't be enough to baffle him. Mo Fan had learned to make decisions according to the opponent's class. How could an even more experienced player like Zhang Boteo not be able to either? Deception was a ninja. Ninjas could use their ninjutsu to climb up walls, and no pro player would ever overlook this ability when playing against a ninja. Because Empty Waves was a certain distance away from the stalactite, he could see the majority of it. When he moved to the side to take a look from a different angle, he also moved forward, which allowed him to see the entire height of the stalactite. But there was nothing below or above. Zhang Boteo reacted at lightning speed. Empty Waves immediately went back to his previous position. Deception was instantly exposed. Empty Waves slashed upwards, sending a light wave slash towards him. The slash came out at the speed of light, tearing through Deception. Poof! It's a shadow clone technique. Pan Lin shouted as if he were crying out in surprise in place of Zhang Boteo. In reality, with their omniscient view over the battle, they had already known this would happen. As Mo Fan's deception circled around to prevent Empty Waves from seeing him, he also used a shadow clone technique. The shadow clone remained hanging on the stalactite, while the real body dropped to the ground and then disappeared. Underground tunneling technique. Deception had used underground tunneling technique to hide and then strike at the right opportunity. Wah! Deception drilled out of the ground, earth still crumbling away from him, as he aimed straight for Empty Waves' throat. But by this time, Empty Waves had retracted his divine chains guard. Ding! Their weapons collided. Empty Waves used the impact to slide backwards. He was even able to react to such a sudden underground tunneling technique. Earthquake Sword. Empty Waves threw out an earth wave slash. It was too close too fast, and this time, Mo Fan wasn't able to react in time. Deception was hit by the attack. It wasn't that Zhang Boteo's reaction speed had been godly, but rather that he had been ready. He had seen through Mo Fan's plans. The light wave slash had simply been a bait. After earth, fire and ice. Two successive wave slashes one after the other. However, when the ice crystals swept over, all that was frozen was a straw dummy. Substitution technique. Mo Fan had used a ninja skill to escape this combo. This was why the threefold wave was always light, fire, ice, in that order. Otherwise, the combo could be broken. Earth wave slash didn't have the same speed as light wave slash. As a result, there was an opening between the following fire and ice wave slashes, which Mo Fan seized, using a substitution technique to escape. Substitution technique teleported the user to a random location, so Mo Fan didn't know where he would end up at himself. It would naturally be even more difficult for the opponent to follow since there was no logic behind it. Mo Fan had taken advantage of this randomness multiple times in the group arena against Tyranny. He gambled again and again, and in the end, he was able to beat Tyranny's Chen Muyan. That fight had left a deep impression on many people, and now that Mo Fan had used substitution technique again, their first thought was that it wasn't to escape but rather to attack. Jongbo Teo also realized this point. Empty waves didn't just stand there stupidly. He looked all around him, swinging his sword in a circle. Magic burst from his blade, covering all of empty waves. Nebula Wave / the level 75 spell blade skill. When used, the magic would be shaped randomly. But the magic could also be controlled by the user. One way was to have it spread around 360 degrees. The skill was extremely flexible, allowing the user to use it in surprising ways. After this skill came out, it became hugely popular among Spellblade players. Spellblades mainly added points into their wave / their wave formations. However, the Nebula Wave / was so fun and useful that even players who specialized in wave formations would spend their skill points to learn and level it. Pro players obviously wouldn't learn it just because it was fun. Jongbo Teo's empty waves specialized in wave slashes. As a result, he had spent a lot of effort coming up with ways to use this skill. Mo Fan really had used the substitution technique to attack. He didn't want it to repeat the same strategy as before, but he simply realized the fact that the substitution technique's random teleport could catch the opponent off guard. He was just taking advantage of it right now. He threw a storm shuriken towards empty waves and rushed forward to close in. But then, he saw empty waves turn in a circle, creating a protective barrier around him with a Nebula Wave / Shua. The fast and powerful storm shuriken was blocked by the Nebula Wave / and deflected to the side. The priority of Nebula Wave / wasn't low, having properties of both offense and defense. For a moment, Mo Fan wasn't able to find any openings. When Jongbo Teo turned and used Nebula Wave / he had located Deception. The Nebula Wave / appeared to be a complete circle, but after Jongbo Teo found Deception, he immediately made some slight adjustments. In the end, the Nebula Wave / formed a large crescent moon. His short sword, Divine Chains, swung towards Deception. Instead of spreading outwards, the magic swept towards that direction. The AoE covered at least 5 or 6 body lengths. The magic wave was neither concentrated nor dispersed. It was like a wall that was pushing towards Deception. Dodge. Dodge where? Up, down, left, right? In the end, Jongbo Teo was able to turn the Nebula Wave / into a gigantic AoE attack. Deception's escape routes had been sealed, and his escape tools, Shadow Clone Technique and Substitution Technique, were on cooldown. But Mo Fan didn't just sit there doing nothing. Deception immediately retreated backwards. The Nebula Wave / was shaped like a crescent moon, which meant that there was more room to escape from the sides. Deception wanted to take advantage of this point. But as the Nebula Wave / expanded, it quickly patched up these openings on the side. The magic was densely weaved together with no openings. This time, Mo Fan was helpless. The retreating Deception was swallowed by the Nebula Wave / Everyone looked towards Deception's health. But they discovered that the powerful Nebula Wave / didn't deal as much damage as everyone had expected. This level 75 skill had a very high base damage, but because of how spread out it was, the damage was reduced considerably. Loud thunder, but only small drops of rain. That was the feeling this attack gave off. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. Some people felt disappointed. Some people saw this attack as nothing more than the start of a combo. Empty waves got up and gave chase, sending out wave / after wave / magic / after magic / striking Deception. The combo meter soared as Deception's health plummeted. There was unexpectedly nothing Mo Fan could do. Empty waves didn't only include the unbreakable threefold wave, but also many other waves / skill. Even so, Mo Fan wasn't able to find an opening to escape. Escaping was what Mo Fan was best at. In terms of escaping, Mo Fan was number 1 even in the pro scene. But right now, his Deception had unexpectedly been completely locked into place by empty waves. By empty waves, a spellblade. This was worthy of astonishment. Although Spellblades were swordsmen, they were considered a mid-range magic class. There were two ways to play Spellblades. The first was to specialize in wave formations, larger AoEs and strong CC. The other way was to specialize in wave slash, stronger DPS but weaker CC. Their mid-range meant that they didn't have the same oppressiveness as close-ranged classes. However, Zhang Boteo's empty waves had linked together his wave slash so tightly that not even a master at escaping like Mo Fan was able to get away. How is he doing it? Those familiar with Spellblades were in awe. They couldn't see the reason. They could only be in awe at Zhang Boteo's skill. No wonder he was the number one Spellblade. He could do what others couldn't. As for the pro players, they quickly discovered the secret: prediction and positioning. Whenever Zhang Boteo's empty waves used a wave slash, he would never be in the same spot. He was fully putting to use the characteristics of every wave slash, searching for the most suitable position to send his attack where he wanted it to go, striking deception and continuing the combo. Every attack was a read. This was because Mo Fan wasn't just doing nothing. He was trying to find an opening, and every struggle from deception was read perfectly by Zhang Boteo. No, he isn't just reading him, Yishu said. He's constantly putting out bait. Every attack he makes leaves what seems like an opening, but this opening will quickly be patched up by his next attack. Mo Fan is too sharp. His reactions are too fast. The moment he sees the opening, he immediately goes for it. However, by then, Zhang Boteo has already patched it with another attack which then leaves another opening. It's a strategy that works against Mo Fan specifically. He's taking advantage of Mo Fan's strengths, rather than his weaknesses. That guy's quite terrifying, Yishu said. It never feels like he's that great of a player though, Chen Guo said. Because he's too calm, Yishu said. End chapter.